Good afternoon. I am First Selectwoman Brenda Kupchick, and we are joining you. I am joining you with representatives from our community in our first of what I hope are many community conversations regarding racial injustice and inequity, not just in our community, but across our state and country. I first want to announce for those who are tuned in on WebEx or are watching live on Fair TV, that all of us here, panelists, we are not wearing face coverings because we are distanced 6 feet apart and we are following all the CDC guidelines. So I just wanted for the public's edification to know that that's what we are doing. I want to thank the panelists who agreed to be here today. I wish it could have been more. I wish we could have had a open discussion in one of our auditoriums where more people could attend in public, but obviously we're living in a different world and we are living under executive orders, and we are trying to make sure that we are abiding by the rules, the public safety rules. So we only have a certain amount of panelists here, but we have, hopefully for our first time with WebEx, it only allows up to 100 people to be on it, and I apologize for that, but it's the limitation that we do have. But we wanted to give an opportunity for the public to be able to speak to us. So the way that we're going to do this is that Rabbi Kormis has been gracious enough to offer to moderate, and each of the panelists is going to have an opportunity to speak. But the intent for me is to allow the public to have an opportunity, as many people as possible, to speak, not just to the panelists, but to our entire community and everyone who's listening on the WebEx. I do want to announce that the last 2 weeks have been very emotional for me, as they have been for everyone in our community. And I didn't just want to have a community conversation that just ended today, but I wanted to have something that lasts, or something that produces meaningful dialogue and changes for all of us. So I have appointed Selectman Lefkowitz to lead a task force on racial injustice and inequity, and she will work with me, and we will figure out how that will be formed, so that this won't be just the first or last conversation. This will be ongoing, and the task force, and my hope and my vision is that this task force will listen to the community, throughout the community. We'll take the time to sit with law enforcement and listen to them, to sit down with our state delegation and understand the laws that are surrounding law enforcement and other laws, not just law enforcement, and to sit down with our education officials and talk about how we can potentially incorporate more meaningful programs in our schools that help raise awareness. And these conversations should be happening in our schools. Not just at home, but in our schools as well. So I thank you, Selectman Lefkowitz, for stepping up to do this work, because it's very important, and I hope that this is going to be meaningful. So I think I've tasked all of my, one thing I do want to say before we hand it over to the moderator, Rabbi Kormis, is that the forum in which everyone who is signed on now is called WebEx. It is a system that we've been using for our town meetings. And the way that it works is that it's almost like a Zoom. You all can kind of see each other. There is a little bar at the bottom, or clicking opportunities. And at the bottom, there's one that says chat. So if you want to get into the queue, if you're on the WebEx and you want to get into the queue to speak, click on that chat with your name, and we have town staff looking at that, and then they will give the name to Rabbi Kormis, and he will call out to the first and then go through the list of people so everyone has a chance. And I will graciously hand this over to Rabbi Kormis.
Thank you, First Selectwoman Kupchick. Thank you to all the panelists for joining us today. I'm Rabbi Kormis. I serve Congregation Bethel here in Fairfield, and I'm really honored and thrilled to be with you today and to moderate this important community conversation on racial injustice and inequality. When the First Selectwoman called me a couple of days ago asking me if I was willing to moderate this panel, I didn't hesitate. because I feel there is a great need to listen from our leaders and also to listen to you, to listen to our citizens from the town of Fairfield. What's your feeling? How are you responding to this challenging time, particularly after the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery? We all want to express our feelings. We all want to share with others how we are feeling, but at the same time, the coronavirus is not giving us an opportunity to do that as we would normally do it. So I feel that this forum is a wonderful opportunity for us to, first of all, welcome our state and town leaders, but at the same time to listen to you and to see where are you standing right now, what are your feelings, and how are you coping with this challenging time in our country. Well, the way that we are going to run this forum is as follows. First, I am going to introduce our panelists for today, and then I'm going to share a question that I would like each one of you to answer it. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Yes, 2 minutes. And I have my phone here, so I'm going to give you 2 minutes. I'm going to be the bad rabbi today, and nicely I'm going to try to stop you if you go over 2 minutes. And after that, after each panelist presents his or her answer to our question, we're going to open the same question for our viewers, and I'm also going to be the bad rabbi today with you, and I'm going to try to keep you to 2 minutes so we can listen to as many people as possible, and that's the whole idea of our community conversation for today. After that, we are going to give a second round for all the panelists to respond or to comment on any of the comments that we're going to get from the public, and then we're going to wrap up our conversation, and the first Selectwoman is going to walk us through the next steps. So I really want to congratulate Selectwoman Nancy Lefkowitz for being appointed as the leader of this important task force for our town. So let me introduce you to the panelists that will be participating today. Many of them, you already know them for their wonderful work in our community, many state leaders and town leaders, and their faces are very familiar to all of us. So I'd like to introduce you first to our first Selectwoman, Brenda Kupchick, to Selectwoman Nancy Lefkowitz, right there, and to Selectman Tom Flynn. I'd like to introduce you to Tameisha Powell-Dunmore, who is a member of our RTM in the 6th District. Thank you so much for being with us. I would like to introduce you to our State Representative, Brian Farnen. Thank you. To our State Representative, Laura.Devlin. And I would like to also introduce you to State Representative Cristin McCarthy who's right there. To our State Senator Tony Hwang, and to Police Captain Bob Kalamaras, and also to our Chief of the Fairfield Police, Chris Lyddy. So it's really a wonderful opportunity for us to reflect upon issues that are very dear to our heart. It's a great opportunity for us to listen what our leaders have to say about this topic of racial injustice and inequality. So the question that I would like to share with our panelists, and that I would like you to answer briefly, is the following. Please share a topic, feeling, or challenge about racial inequality and or social justice that is dear to your heart, and how can we do better about this issue in the town of Fairfield. So we're going to go around the room, and I would ask you, Brenda, if you would start.
Thank you, Rabbi. Well, I would say this time right now for our whole community, leading a community for your first member during what I would arguably say has been a very challenging time. And this issue is heartbreaking to me as a leader, and I don't want to have our community go through this without conversation. So I'm here to listen, and I'm here to lead on issues that I think are vitally important. Thank you.
Next, please, Selectwoman Lefkowitz.
Thank you, Rabbi Cormiss, and thank you, Brenda. If you hear the quivering in my voice, it's because it's been such an emotional time, and to that end, I've written some of my thoughts down, not because I don't feel them from my heart, but because it's so important to get this right. But this is what I promise. I will continue to raise my voice, not just as your Selectwoman, but as a mom, as an activist, an advocate, and as a citizen. I will use my voice against racial injustice, and I'll listen more actively to the Black members of this community. I stand in solidarity with the protesters who are fighting for racial equality. Black lives matter, and not just because it's a trending hashtag, but because this is an ideal essential to our health and well-being as a community. In my role as Selectwoman, and at the urging of so many of you, thank you, I signed the My Brother's Keeper Alliance pledge, and I encourage all of the elected officials to take a look and consider supporting that as well. I acknowledge that members of this community are angry and hurting, and I'm really sorry. I'm angry too by what I've seen and heard. Fortunately, it does seem like we're at a collective tipping point. This community can become anti-racist, but first, we have hard work to do, and that starts with acknowledging our history of slave ownership and its relationship to our affluence today. As a predominantly white community, we must also acknowledge our privilege and the implicit biases we have because of the color of our skin. We have to examine our own fragility and how it perpetuates systemic racism. We have to have some really difficult conversations, honest conversations about issues like affordable housing and open choice enrollment, and reform those policies that are inherently designed to maintain an inherently racist status quo. I'm not afraid of having these difficult conversations, and I'm grateful that you're entrusting me with that ability to do so. I'm really not afraid of those conversations. I'm afraid not having them makes me part of the problem, and like many, I desperately want to be part of a solution. Intrinsic to my Jewish identity is the importance of tikkun olam, the call to repair the world. And while I am a person of deep faith, I've learned over these past weeks, thanks to some conversations with new friends, that I have a different kind of soul work to do, and this work is as essential as any tasks and actions we take. So now I'm just grateful to be part of this community that is committed to growth and change, particularly at this moment in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Selectwoman Lefkowitz. And next we would like to invite Selectman Flynn to please answer our question.
Thank you, Rabbi, and thank you for moderating the event. And to the first Selectwoman, thank you for putting it together. It's a very important conversation for the community. In looking back in the events of the last couple of weeks, you really have to look inward to associate with what happened, to see what happened. And the one thing that I keep coming back to is that racism, sexism, ageism, prejudice of all types is a learned behavior. It's not something that's innate. So you really have to look at your family unit, and you really have to look at how you talk about race, how you treat people. And I've often said in relation to my parents that are both gone now, that I won the lottery, in that the only thing that got you an invite to our house was being a good person. And they treated everybody equally, and that's something that they tried to pass down to my brother and I, and something that my wife and I have tried to pass down to our kids. When I look at my life, I look at 4 incidents that race played a direct role. The first was when I was in middle school, and I had a friend who lived in the town next door, which was a more diverse town than my own. And we were playing basketball with a group that included African American children and then ourselves. And there were two men that were coming towards us quite quickly, two white men. And the African American friends of ours grabbed us and said, "We gotta go, and we gotta run." And we ran, and I didn't understand why. And when they stopped after we hid, they told us that they knew who those guys were and that they were up to no good and would come after them. And me being about 10, 11 years old said, "Well, why did I run?" And they said, "Because you associating with us would get it worse than us." And that really resonated with me. The second thing was I had a very good friend in high school and grew up in a primarily white town. He's one of the few African Americans. Nobody treated him any differently on a day-to-day basis. There was no, and he invited me to the town where his father lived, and we went to a party, and I ended up at that party being the only white person there. And they were great to me. It was a great party. We had a lot of fun. I didn't feel, they didn't make me feel different at all. But still, being the only one there that wasn't of the same race, I could feel the difference.
And I know we have two more, but your time is up, so maybe you can leave the next two for the
That's
second
fine.
round.
But my point is, and thank you, my point is, as parents and as families, we shape our family values and we shape the way we address this. And it's important that we commit to be better people, better parents, and have these conversations in our day-to-day lives. And that's how we'll affect change. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Selectman Flynn. And next, we would like to invite Tameisha Powell-Dunmore from the RTM District 6 to please share your answer to our question and a topic that is dear to your heart.
Sure. Thank you, Rabbi Cormiss and First Selectman, for having this platform. To sum it up, I wanted to just share the golden rule, and that is to love your neighbor. Fellow man as yourself in everything that you do. Do it as you would want them to do unto you. In all that has transpired, I want to say that evil has no color. It comes only to steal, kill, and destroy in whomever would yield to it. I believe that tyranny has almost like a crouching stance within our law enforcement system. And tyranny is defined as a cruel, unreasonable, or arbitrary use of power or control. Based on the current events that have unfolded within the past month in our nation, it is safe to say our nation's law enforcement system has fallen prey to tyranny, and they are moving towards an autocratic way of thinking. And unless we the people, all people, this united nation under God, come together and stand against it, it will continue. How? Well, let me preface it by what Theodore Roosevelt said. He said that no man is above the law, and no man is below the law, nor do we ask any man's permission when we ask him to obey the law. And how we as Fairfield, Americans come together is by setting firm, no-tolerance checks and balances within our systems. That when we see something, we say something, becoming our brother's keeper and becoming humanity keepers, protectors and defenders of life, okay? And for those within the system and also for those that are outside of the system, we have to unite as one voice, as one body, as one nation. And we have to come together, demolishing all unbalanced scales within our system across the board. It's not, and as an African American woman, it hurt me to see what happened, and I hear the cry of the African Americans, and I hear the cry of those that have allied with the African American community, but it's more than just a color. It's an evil, and that evil, it'll use anyone that bends towards it. So unless we love each other and see humanity in each person and respect life, respect the giver of life, then we can only change. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Brian Farnen, our state representative.
Oh, thank you, and thank you, Brenda, for having this meeting, establishing the task force. Nancy, I am really excited that you're going to be leading that up. I think that's perfect. When I think about what's transpired over the last few weeks, few months, I've been humbled, inspired to see so many people taking to the street and really looking to, of all colors, to fight against systematic racism and injustice. And I do think this is one of those unique times where real change can occur. As a state legislator, I want to make sure I play a part in that and to make sure that we move forward where something as concrete is done. And I'm going to be focused on a few things as a state legislator in the next session to hopefully address some of the problems that we've seen. First, body cameras. That's something the state police has, you see the town of Fairfield has. There's about 50 towns that currently still do not have body cameras. This is for the protection of the public and the police officers. 99% of the police officers, 99 point whatever percent of the police officers are public servants, heroes, and for those, the consequences are too high for those few bad apples, and I do think body cameras being required across the state in every town would be a good thing. Second, I think there was a great Wall Street Journal article on this. I think the independent review of citizen complaints of police officers is something that we need to look more serious into. I think there is an inherent conflict of interest, and if you want to change a culture, you need accountability. And lastly, I think what we saw with COVID-19 is, it really brought out some of the greatest inequities in our society. And I look at, for example, with what a good job the town of Fairfield did with the distance learning. And you look one town over, and Bridgeport really struggled. And how do we make sure that every municipality and every parent gets the same quality education? So I think this is something we really need to look at in special session going into the fall to make sure that every community gets equal access to a phenomenal education, because if we are going to continue on with distance learning, I think there's inherent dangers in that in the fall. If you have a situation where you've got, working parents and things like that. So those are things I want to be focused on so that for all the protests, real change occurs, and those are just three of many things that I like to be focused on. Thank you.
Thank you, State Representative. Next, we would like to invite Laura.Devlin, our State Representative, to please answer the question.
Thank you, Rabbi. I hope is working okay. I also would like to add my thanks to First Selectwoman Kupchick for organizing this, which is really the beginning of a conversation in our community, which I think is so important. And Nancy, your passion around such an important topic is going to be so important in the work that you lead going forward with the task force, and I think that's fabulous. The events in Minnesota were heinous, and there's no other way to describe it. The murderer of George Floyd was a bad cop and a bad man, and is in no way representative of how we are blessed in the town of Fairfield with our police department. What I would say, what it has done also is certainly ignited passion across the country, and we are now, I hope, at a turning point of real change. As a mother, it has instilled conversations that we haven't had around our dinner table. We haven't had with our children or our children challenging us and having, debates and discussions and looking at things from different points of view. And whether it is from my son and my daughter or from my nephew and with, their partners, other siblings, neighbors, friends, it has been incredible to have the conversations that have started that I have to say didn't happen before. Hate and bigotry has no place anywhere in our nation, in our community, in our society. And bigotry, racism, it has to be called out. There is absolutely, no question in that regard. It was humbling to me to participate on behalf of the First Selectwoman at the vigil at First Church recently, and I also attended a protest in Trumbull. And I was there to listen, and I listened to voices of people in that community and their experiences that you don't recognize and aren't aware of. So I look forward to the work that's going to continue. I'd like to be a part of that, not just as a mother and as a citizen, but also as a state lawmaker. You know, there are multiple things that our police department have in place in policy that are not state law and that are not consistent with other police departments across this nation, or certainly across our state. And I think that, you know, already discussions are happening. There aren't necessarily concrete proposals in front of us, but we need to look at those things. And again, we are blessed in our community, and I look forward to working with everybody to make it better. So thank you.
Thank you, State Representative Devlin. Thank you so much. And now we're going to move to the other side of the room, and would like to invite State Representative McCarthy Vahey to please answer the question.
Thank you so much, Rabbi, and thanks to all of you for being here and for those who are joining us and listening in. Some of the words and phrases that come to mind for me today with this event are humility, listening, connection, compassion, outrage, meaningful, sustainable change, no more lip service, unspeakable grief, vulnerability, withstanding criticism and accepting it, taking responsibility, holding people's pain, and systemic, unacknowledged racism. Today's not really the kind of conversation that we'd really like to have, but it is a chance for us to hear. I've been privileged to be part of some of our past community conversations, and I will continue to engage in meaningful sharing. But I want to do more than that. I want us to address the glaring inequality for people of color. I want to build the relationships and the systems needed to address the impacts of racism. Yesterday, I heard legislative colleagues from here and around the state talk about the need to raise up the voices of people of color in our communities, not just one day, but every day. One legislator said that when white people ask him what they can do, he tells them, "You can get behind me." I will never know what it's like to live as a Black woman, to experience the racism that's part of everyday life in one of the most segregated states with some of the largest educational achievement gaps in the nation. But I can get behind Black leaders, and I can lift up the voice of the Black community. Author James Baldwin, a poet and a prophet, ends his book, The Fire, next time with these words: "Everything now, we must assume, is in our hands. We have no right to assume otherwise. If we, and now I mean the relatively conscious whites and the relatively conscious Blacks who must, like lovers, insist on or create the consciousness of the others, do not falter in our duty now, we may be able, handful that we are, to end the racial nightmare and achieve our country and change the history of the world. If we do not now dare everything, the fulfillment of that prophecy, recreated in the Bible in a song by a slave, is upon us. God gave Noah the rainbow sign. No more water, the fire next time." We as people with power and authority have a particular duty to listen, to hear, to feel. And I look forward to hearing from those who are able to take the time away today from work and family to participate. And I intend to continue on this journey to look at all systems that need to be changed. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, State Representative. I would like to remind our viewers the question that our panelists are answering. The question is, please share a topic, feeling, challenge about racial inequality and or social justice that is dear to your heart, and how can we do better about this issue in our town of Fairfield. It's my pleasure to invite our State Senator, Tony Hwang.
Thank you, Rabbi, and I want to thank the town of Fairfield for having this serious and much needed conversation. Black lives truly matters. What happened to George Floyd was criminal, and unless it was captured on film, it might have been stuck into the back shelves of discussion and quagmire. So with that said, what I saw in the powerful protests, the peaceful peaceful protest that occurred in Connecticut, credit needs to be given to the participants, as well as the town leaders and law enforcement for creating that opportunity, which is one of our basic fundamental rights in this country. We have a right to voice our thoughts and concern. And what I saw in many of these protests was a powerful reminder that people are energized. People have had an opportunity to address an issue that has sat way too dormant. And it also opened an opportunity for more dialogue. I've had an opportunity to reach out to many of my friends from many backgrounds, and some of the stories that they've experienced, some of the biases and the challenges and the frustrations that they had in growing up and surviving through and succeeding despite the obstacles that they have is a challenge that they wish they never had to go through. And what worries them the most is not only what they had to go through, but they worry about their loved ones and their children and what they must endure if this country does not get better. That being said, I think it's important to have solutions. And with the protest and a voice, and with all of this energy that we have right now, let us channel that to create solutions. I'm proud to say that in Connecticut, we have done a good start to these type of solutions. We passed legislation, but to answer the specific question, Rabbi, that you raised from the audience, what are a solution that we have in the state and in the town of Fairfield that we could undertake? I will tell you, conversations need to occur. Real conversations that may be uncomfortable, that may be awkward, they may be emotional. But I remember perhaps maybe 7, 8 years ago that the town undertook a diversity conversation. We had across all segments of people that unfortunately have gone to their sides and gone to their corners and only listen to viewpoints that support their viewpoints. What we did in that diversity conversation was a real expanse, a real vulnerability and open discussions. That created an opportunity for us to learn from each other, not to be succumb to bias, presumptions, and a judgment, but to truly understand each individual. I'm reminded of the words of Martin Luther King in his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. And I'm always taken by the fact that he wishes for the one day in which his children will be judged by the character of their being and not by the color of their skin. So to answer your question, one such matter that we can undertake in this town and to start through that task force is to compile a unique set of differing ideas, differing viewpoints. It may be awkward, but I remember one of the points that were being said in those dialogues. We need to learn from what we're not comfortable with. We need to be confronted with realities that exist that we have shied away from. And that is a necessary conversation. And unfortunately, far too many times we go to our corners, we go to our comfort, we go to the same people that believe in the viewpoints that we believe. The way we grow, the way we become a better society is when we exchange, share, and truly care. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Next, I would like to invite Captain Kalamaras from our Fairfield Police Department. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you. I cannot hear you, I think.
Check.
Yep. Nope,
there we go. Thank you, Rabbi, and thank you, First Selectwoman, for inviting us from the police department here. First, I'd like to say that I'm very proud of the citizens of this community because, we've had 2 demonstrations in our town so far, and all the demonstrators have been very calm, peaceful, and they're using their First Amendment rights to speak. And I can honestly say that I'm very proud of that. I'm also proud of the officers who are there standing on the lines and getting yelled at or screamed at or see some signs with expletives in them, and their behavior is exemplary. So I'm also very proud of that. And I'm proud to be a representative of the police department. And sometimes, when things like this happen throughout the nation and the fingers are sometimes pointed at the police department, it gives us an opportunity to reflect on some of the things we do, some of the things we don't do, some of the things we do wrong. And I can tell you, both the chief and I and other members of our organization have been scouring our training records and looking at our policies to ensure that these things are all in place. And it was very satisfying to look back and say, we're there. We're doing most things right. Now, is there room for improvement? Absolutely. Absolutely. There's always room for improvement. But I think as a whole, when things like this come up, and I can tell you, everybody wants to look behind the curtain to see what the cops are saying at the police department, you know? And it's interesting. I can poll any single officer probably in the state, and they would agree that the death of George Floyd was completely unacceptable and completely egregious. To that end, as leaders of a police organization, it's important for us to reflect a professional appearance, for our officers to have the utmost integrity and treat everybody with respect. And that really is what the message we're trying to get out to our officers right now, because it's very important at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain. Chief.
Thank you, Rabbi, and thank you for Selectwoman Kupchick for putting this together and inviting us to the table. It means a lot to us. So, ever since the murder of Mr. Floyd in Minnesota, the message to me as the chief was time to shut up for a while and listen. And that's kind of what I've done for the last couple weeks, is just listen to people in our community, people of color, and to look globally at what's happening and act locally, things that I can address. And one common message, broad message that I've received is that people of color do not feel comfortable walking down our streets in our predominantly white community. And what a terrible feeling that must be. Now compound it with the possibility of being singled out and the police sent there and not feeling safe in the presence of police. What a terrible feeling. So I'm deeply concerned about the weaponization of police in our community. A person walking down the street becomes the target of a phone call, and we become that weapon responding to a neighborhood's concern. So this is an area that I can address immediately, and we have. We are not going to respond to calls for service that are predicated solely on the color of a person's skin. There must be a second qualifying event to elicit our response. The bigger picture, though, is how we develop and build bridges where any person of color feels completely comfortable interacting with us. And that's going to take a lot. That's going to take hard conversations and hard actions. But we will get there. We're committed to it. It is vital, and we will make that happen. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Chief. And before we move to the next part of our session today, would like to take a moment. I think my microphone is. Thank you. So I would like to take a moment to thank you all. I think that this is a very valuable conversation that we are having right now. And I hope that you feel the same way and our viewers feel the same way. Some of the elements that we have listened today is the importance and the principle of being created in the image and likeness of God, right? And when we see each other in our eyes, we recognize that regardless of the color of our skin, regardless of our sexual orientation, regardless of our political view, we are all created in the image and likeness of God. We talked about the importance of the Jewish principle of tikkun olam, which I feel very dear to my heart. Racism as a learned behavior, something that unfortunately We learn from parents, grandparents, friends, peers. We heard about the evil that has no color, and the importance of bringing a better place to, or bringing some changes that could help to improve our police here in Fairfield and around the state. And then the paramount value of education and give equal access to education. Because I am convinced that one of the most powerful tools that we have to fight against racism and discrimination is education. And we should grant that equal access to education to every single citizen of our town, our state, and hopefully our country. We also heard about multicultural debate and multi-generational debate, inviting kids, teens, and future generations. We heard about racism and bigotry, that they have to be called out, and we have the responsibility of speaking up and stepping up against racism, bigotry, and discrimination. The importance of humility, community, being compassionate, and connections to other people. The importance of solutions, and to channel the energy to hopefully create solutions to the challenges that we have in our town and in our state. The real conversations, right? And talk about issues that can be challenging for us. Issues that would bring us out from our comfort zone, but at the same time, that's probably the only way we can make a true impact and a true change in our lives and in the life of our citizens. To learn from each other, and we're very proud of the work that our Fairfield Police Department is doing. I want to thank the Captain and the Chief for being with us today, and we're very fortunate to have you in our town. So there were a number of ways we could move to the next phase of our debate. We could have asked our viewers to send or to write in the chat direct questions for the panelists. That could have been one way to do it. We thought that if we were going that route, we won't have enough time to listen to as many people as we would like to hear today. And therefore, we would ask you to kindly refrain from asking direct questions to the panelists at this point. Your questions are important. Your questions are really dear to all of us. But if you have a particular question to one of our panelists, you could send an email to the newly created task force, or you can send a direct email to one of our panelists. I understand that the emails will be on the screen, so feel free to email them directly. So our goal for this second part of the forum today is to give you the opportunity to express your feelings, to express your views, to express your thoughts about racial injustice and inequality. And I would like to remind you the question that we have been discussing today. And we would like to make this a time to listen to you, because we believe that we can all learn from each other, and particularly from our viewers. So the question is, please share a topic feeling challenge about racial inequality and or social justice that is dear to your heart, and how can we do better about this issue in the town of Fairfield. And our first speaker for this second part of the afternoon is going to be Jason Lefkowitz. I hope I pronounced your last name well. So Jason, thank you, and we are listening to you. And I'm going to be the
Hi, can you hear me?
So you have 2 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great. Well, if I can't ask direct questions, I'll ask some rhetorical questions. This is going to be rough. Is there a representative from the police union here? And that will be for you to decide. Has Fairfield ever successfully indicted a local police officer for misconduct? What % of Fairfield's budget do we spend on police? Are there penalties for police in Fairfield not using their body cameras? What other community organizations can we fund or funnel money from the police into, such as expanding public housing, access to social workers, increasing Medicaid, increasing unemployment benefits, increasing disability benefits? What % of Fairfield police actually live in Fairfield? What % of Fairfield police are non-white? What is the median income for Fairfield police officers? Did the police budget go up this past year? Did it get fully used this past year? Did they spend new money on anything in particular, maybe weapons? What training is mandatory for our police officers? Have any of our police officers taken a class from a man named Dave Grossman on killology, which teaches people how to kill? Do our police officers have to file a report if they pull a gun on someone? Do we have data since the decriminalization of marijuana on how it has affected nonviolent drug crime in Fairfield? What percent of police revenue is generated by traffic stops? What percent of people stopped for traffic violations are non-white? Has the town of Fairfield or our police department paid out any money in settlements over the last few years, especially for misconduct? Have any of our police officers avoided civic charges by using qualified immunity? Does our local police department really need firearms? How often are they actually discharged and used? Can we switch over to less lethal options such as tasers or purely batons? Could we continue our police department, Jersey did, and not permanently, but forcing all members to reapply and give the chance a second opportunity to look at their qualifications? How many excessive force complaints have our police gotten in the last few years? What military weapons does our police department currently own? When was the police contract last signed? Were any misconduct records purged? Were any fired officers reinstated? Does our police department use any predictive policing technology or AI? Can we use it on our own department, please? That's all I really have to ask.
Wow, that's a lot, Jason. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that we could spend a forum for each of your questions, right? 2 hours forum for each of your questions. And I'm sure that the chief and the captain will be happy to address your questions. And please feel free to send them an email, and I'm sure that they will be happy to address your questions. And it's clear that you put a lot of thought on your questions, Jason, and we really thank you for sharing them with us. Thank you, Jason. Next, we have John Whaley, please. We cannot hear you.
Oh, I didn't realize I was going to get a chance to ask a question. Thank you very much. I'm a teacher at Fairfield Public Schools. You know, a lot of the questions are based around, you know, law enforcement, and I'm not a politician, so I don't think I have so much of a political question, sort of maybe in the realm of rhetorical questions as well. You know, I'm just wondering, like, if we're truly interested in the systemic racism in our town, we have to kind of start at this macro level as opposed to the micro level. I'm not a fan of thinking that we need to start in our home, and then once we start in our home, everything is good. We need policy in place. So I'm just, again, I guess these are sort of more rhetorical questions than anything, but, you know, are we willing to pay higher taxes to help bolster our social safety net? Are we willing to stop tracking our students and stop leveling our students to force the caste system of, you know, academia in our public schools? And maybe my most important question is, will we regionalize our public school system? So places like Weston, New Canaan, and Fairfield have to share resources with places like Norwalk and Bridgeport to ensure that all kids get the education they deserve. I'd love to know your thoughts about any of those. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Certainly, and as I was saying before, I truly believe that there is a deep connection between education and injustice, inequality, and discrimination. So we really thank you, and I think that those are questions that the task force will be considering going forward, and we thank you, John, for bringing those questions to our attention. Next, we have Michael Flato.
To thank Brenda and Nancy for their leadership in organizing this meeting. However, I want to remind the panel that these discussions won't do any good unless they're paired with concrete actions, including those that have been brought up by my fellow residents. I hope that this is the first of many such discussions, although I would implore you to schedule any further meetings outside of traditional working hours and to publish notice more than 24 hours in advance so more members of our community have the opportunity to participate. Recently, news broke of police and military personnel in Washington, D.C. committing what in a military conflict would be considered war crimes against protesters utilizing their constitutionally guaranteed rights to speech and assembly. On June 2nd, the County of Arlington, Virginia, announced that in response, they would no longer contribute their officers to provide so-called mutual aid during this movement. On May 30th, the Fairfield Police Department released a lofty statement condemning the murder of George Floyd, but failed to acknowledge the systemic injustice and racism inherent in police departments across the country, including their own. Later the very same day, Fairfield sent officers to aid the Bridgeport police in suppressing a protest in Bridgeport, which included the use of pepper spray on unarmed protesters. I call on Mr. Lyddy to put his thoughts and prayers to good use. First, take concrete steps to address racism and bias in his own department. Next, follow Arlington's lead and tell Bridgeport that Fairfield will no longer provide officers to become complicit in their brutality until they take substantial steps to address their racism in their department, including the firing of the officer who murdered Jason Negron 3 years ago. As I said earlier, all the discussions in the world won't do any good until we use our position as a wealthy town and our position as white people to listen to Black voices, to listen and to lift up our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I'm sure that Chief Lyddy will be happy to answer your questions. Please feel free to email him directly your questions. I'm sure he'll be happy to be in contact with you. And do we have only one more person? So is Michael still on the line? Is Michael still there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you back, Michael. You were talking about concrete actions. So since we have only one more person that is going to ask a question, what would be your concrete action after listening to all our panelists and members of our town? Let me ask you the question back. What would be the one action that you learned from today that you would like to be implemented in our town?
Well, there have been suggestions made by several great sources, but it's not really my place. I would like to listen to Black activists, people who are making real suggestions. The town should adjust the budget, defund the police, put money into actual resources like social workers, increase affordable housing, increase the diversity in our town. I mean, there are so many things that we can do, and there have been books written about it. I can't sum it up in a minute.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. And our next viewer that will participate is Eli Moyes. So you are on.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Hello? Okay. Just want to say a few things quickly here. The issues in our town don't just go towards these micro issues that are adding body cams or increasing accountability, adding an independent review board. I think the real solutions to these problems are recognizing that we have systemic problems and systemic racism that exists in police departments, not only in Fairfield, but around the state and around the country. We will not solve these issues without recognizing that there are issues that exist in Fairfield. Yes, we have made some progress, but to make more progress, we need to recognize that there are issues. We cannot face these only in our households. We cannot face these only by ourselves alone with our families. We must, first of all, educate, and we must increase equity of education around the town, and we also must, open these discussions, but back up with pivots and action, so changes are actually made. Discussions, yes, they can educate and they can make some difference, but we will make no legitimate difference without action and without people answering the questions of people who are asking legitimate and good questions. Thank you. That's all I have to say. Also, we must elevate, don't listen to me, elevate Black activists and Black voices, because those are the people who have suffered and experienced the pain the most. So that's who we need to raise up and listen to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I see that we have a few more people who will be asking questions. They're writing your names right here. So the next person is Julie Gottlieb, and you are on.
Hi, thank you very much. I appreciate the efforts in putting this together this afternoon, and I'd like to acknowledge some really great things that were said earlier, acknowledging what needs to be done, what needs to be admitted, and particularly Eli, who just spoke before me. I'll make it short and sweet. This was billed as a community conversation, and I'm going to be brutally honest. I don't see much of a community represented here. I don't see the faces of persons of color whose input is absolutely essential to this conversation. Although it's not a conversation because we are speaking and there's no way for us to engage and there's no way for us to have the dialogue that needs to be said. So I would ask, I'd even demand that the next time we have a conversation, it is truly a conversation and that action comes out of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And as First Select Woman mentioned at the beginning of our forum and conversation today, this is the beginning. This is not the end. This is the first step of multiple steps that we will be seeing in the future. And I think that the creation of our task force is geared to exactly what you are saying, Julie, and is to create the opportunity to bring different participants of our town to express their feeling and to have a conversation. Hopefully the virus will be over soon and we will be able to get together in person. We're certainly trying to do the best we can with the circumstances that we are all facing right now and with this remote conversation. But certainly we were just starting the conversation, and this is only the beginning of a process that Nancy will be leading in the future. So next we would like to invite Mark Aarons.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. You can hear me?
We can hear you, but very low. Can you turn the volume? Can you speak louder?
Sure. Thank you for this opportunity. Is that better?
No.
All right, how's this? We'll try it this way.
Okay, we can try. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm an attorney. I represent the family of Mubarak Soliman, who was murdered by a Connecticut state trooper in West Haven this past January. And I'm a civil rights lawyer. Mubarak.
Mark, can you speak up a little bit? Because we can hear you, but very, very soft. Maybe we can put a microphone here.
Sorry. Is this better?
Okay, go ahead. Let's see if we can hear you better.
Is this better?
No. Okay.
Turn up the volume, I guess.
Any call from a phone?
Would you be willing to write some of your thoughts through the chat, and maybe we can read them from your chat? Mark?
That's fine.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for trying. We are all trying. Okay, next we would like to invite, is that his or her last name? Mr. or Mrs. Bruno to please come forward. Okay, so next we would like to invite Amanda Hansen to please share with us your thoughts and address the question that we are answering today. Share a topic, feeling, challenge about racial inequality and or social justice that is dear to your heart, and how can we do better about this issue in the town of Fairfield? Amanda.
Yes, as a mother of a black son, can you hear me?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. For being accused of trespassing on our property a year ago, I called a peaceful protest. So this isn't the beginning of the conversation for this town. We have been having this conversation for a year. Maybe you're all just getting caught up. But I wanted to let you know, we started an anti-racism group, myself and Trey Kayumba. We've been meeting once a month for a year, talking about racism and how to be anti-racist in the town of Fairfield. I'd like to speak with Chief Lyddy on getting anti-racism training for the Fairfield Police Department. And I would like to say that he says that they're no longer going to send cars on suspicion of black skin, that black skin is no longer a weapon. Yet 3 days ago, there was a man who was cutting his grass, blowing the clippings in his yard, and the neighbor, the new white female neighbor across the street, called the police on him, and they went to his home to question him. So if we're not still weaponizing black skin, I'm not sure why police cars are. You know, the surety sitting there, I could go on and on with the list of things that we know about what has happened in this town. It's devastating. So many of the community don't know because you guys keep it all under the rug. We know what's lurking in this town. So we've had women who've had guns pointed at them. So we cannot have somebody dead before we have another conversation. This is not the beginning. This is the beginning for all you conversation for a year. Now we're ready for change.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda, for sharing your thoughts.
So don't call me. Yeah, it's not about just my thoughts. You need to stop sending police cars when white ignorant people call and say there's something suspicious. At 5 o'clock, a man taking care of his lawn because he has black skin is not suspicious. That's what's happening in this town.
Thank you. Our next question is going to come from Laura Carson. You're up.
Hi. Oh, wait a second. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Hi. I'm Laura Carson. I happen to be on the RTM District 4, and I just simply want to make this, just my comment is, as white people, I'm reading this book called White Fragility. It's #1 on the bestsellers of New York Times, and it really explains the problem we as white people have addressing racial issues. We have to understand that we're not calling ourselves or you racist, and you can have a black friend, or you could think it's just, we do not understand that we as white people and the color of our skin does not make it more difficult to live life. But for black people, their skin color makes their life from the moment they're born more difficult. And that's what really we have to understand. And there's systemic institutions in place that perpetuate, and we keep doing. And it doesn't mean that I think we are immoral. We're just like ignorant because we don't understand. We've never taken the time to really understand. I mean, it's only been recently, in the last few years, that I understood what it was like when black men and women have to teach their children how to deal with the police. And then black people are always talking about how, what's it like for them when they get to an elevator and someone will grab their purse. We just have to put ourselves in their shoes, and this is when we can first start to understand what they go through. Just put yourselves in their shoes, and then I think we can start to make changes in systemic changes in education, housing. It's implicit bias. And I implore everyone to read the book, White Fragility, or there's also a movie out called Just Mercy, which really shows you how bad these people are treated. So I just implore you to understand what it is. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your recommendation for the book. We will Google it for sure. So we have 2 more people, and then we're going to move to the next part of our community conversation, and we're going to give each of the panelists 2 additional minutes so you can respond or you can comment on any of the comments that we have been listening from our citizens today. So we have Molly Baker.
Hi. I just wanted to make a few comments about things that were said today and my ideas about what Fairfield should be doing instead. First, I want to preface by saying that it is not just a few bad apples, and that I don't know that much about the Fairfield Police Department, but I can assure you that you are not there yet, because that is possible, and training needs to change drastically in all police departments, in all of them. So I don't believe that. Also, I think that body cameras are great, but they are not a good solution. We all watched George Floyd die, and although his murderer is being convicted, there are so many like him that never were. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is the equal access to education that Representative Farnen brought up. I think it's a great idea, and because of that, I want to call Representative Farnen and the rest of the representatives here to look at supporting open choice schooling and also ECS funding. And lastly, I wish that somebody would talk about the possibility of defunding the police, and I want you to all be educated about what that truly means. I think that education needs to get some of that funding. Social services for children need to get some of that funding, because time after time you see people go into prison, a lot of times set up to go there. Most of the time, Black people in prison are set up to go there. So we need to not set people up for prison. That's not okay. So we need to look at prison abolition, reform, and also defunding the police. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. And lastly, we would like to invite Henna Kayumba to please share your thoughts with us, and then we're going to move to the next phase of our forum. Henna, you're on.
Can you hear me?
We'll see. Yes, I think.
Yes, hi. So, forgive me, I have a lot of thoughts. They're kind of all over the place. First and foremost, it's clear who did even the smallest bit of educating themselves prior to this meeting. Cristin, thank you for what you said. And I have seen you actively go out and talk to Black people in our community and speaking with them and hearing their voice. That's a huge thing. Second of all, I wanted to just say that the man who was on earlier, he did post a comment, so I'm just going to read what he said so his voice can be heard. I heard him perfectly. I know a lot of people, I don't know why you guys didn't hear him. He said he represents the family of Mubarak, who was murdered by a Connecticut state trooper in West Haven in January. I've been attending the demonstrations and speaking. My office represented the family of Jason Negron. The state's attorney is investigating the Solomon murder, but he is a state employee. There is no grand jury. We need independent review boards, state and local. That would be a positive step. Also, I don't find it cute to be praising police officers who are trained and have guns at keeping their cool in mostly peaceful protests. To me, that's just disgusting. Second of all, I also want to say that in this community, there are so many people of color who have spoken out with my husband, who runs Fairfield Ubuntu, who have had so many unfortunate complaints about the Fairfield Police Department. I'm wondering why none of these have been addressed. A lot of them fear for speaking out in this community. That goes to show what sort of community we're living in. Second of all, I'm really trying to get my thoughts together, because it's clear that a lot of you just came on here to do lip service. But I'm wondering why the Board of Education, along with other municipalities, has maintained segregation. I'm wondering why Fairfield Ubuntu has been asking the Fairfield Police Department for quite some time now to do diversity training. They agreed to it, but for some reason, Trey and Amanda are the ones doing all of the work, trying to find somebody and trying to get this in motion. Second of all, or third of all, fourth of all, it's just really clear to me who really cares about this.
And you have 10 more seconds.
reading, some of Fairfield, to do some reading with Fairfield Yabantu, to do some reading with White Fragility, to come to the meetings, to hear people out in this community. I've lost my train of thought because of how upset I am at this.
But it's good, and we really appreciate you taking the time to watch this conversation and also to share your thoughts with us. And again, Hannah, this is the beginning of the conversation, and for many of us, you know, this is the first community conversation that we are having on this topic, and we all have a lot of thoughts about it, and we want to thank you for being with us today.
For over a year, so it's clear, and I just want to say that, you know, reading an article, I'm sorry, I'm going to say something, but Brenda, saying that your political hero is Ronald Reagan, who imposed war on drugs and basically was responsible for hundreds of thousands of black men being torn away from their families and in prison, is shameful. Please do your history. Please read into your history before you go into this. I really want you guys to just really read. Simple as that.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, and your 2 minutes are up. So we're going to move to the next part of our forum today, our community conversation, and we're going to follow the same order that we followed previously. So please try to keep your remarks and comments to 2 minutes. I'm sure that we all have many things to comment. We have many things to share with our viewers. So please try to keep it to 2 minutes so each one of us can have an opportunity to speak, and we can conclude by 4 p.m. as we planned. So we're going to start with you, Brenda. No, that's right.
Okay, I just want to first start off by saying I realize that form may have not been perfect. Obviously, we're facing challenges with COVID, and my hope was for our community to have an opportunity to. So I'm sorry. My hope was for our community to have an opportunity to speak and be heard, and that this was the first of what I hope to be many conversations in our community. I don't profess to be perfect or have all the answers on how to get there. However, and I heard a theme sort of throughout some of the comments, and frankly, I'm a little disappointed in the partisanship that I heard. This issue should not be partisan. And I think Tameisha said it best, that evil can live anywhere, in any color. And I think if we start off this conversation with attacking Republicans or attacking Democrats or attacking law enforcement, we're never gonna get there, not ever. And so I'm going to make a call to our community that just lay down your swords and let's have a conversation. Because fighting with each other or pre-describing any sort of motives to anyone in our community is never going to allow us to have an open dialogue. And so I'm sorry that I heard a lot of that today. And I will say, some of the comments regarding our law enforcement, I think, are unfair. I have worked with our law enforcement for over 20 years as a local elected official and as a state official, and now as the first Selectwoman. And I think there's improvements can be made anywhere in any part of our lives. But to systematically say we fund our law enforcement, frankly, I think is an inappropriate statement. So my call to our entire community is to listen to each other and stop ascribing motives to anyone. And I'm looking forward to Selectwoman Nancy Lefkowitz leading our community together in a task force that's genuinely going to listen to everyone in our community and have that dialogue back and forth, questions and answers being asked. And no, we probably won't have all the answers, but let's work together. And I'm looking forward to you leading that charge because you're a fair and balanced person. So thank you everyone for being here today, and most especially thank you Rabbi Kormis for moderating. Does that work?
Is this working? No.
Hello. So like you, Hannah, if you're still listening, I'm also kind of a jumble of thoughts, and I'm trying to take all of this in, and I'll probably find the right words later. And Amanda, like you, I hear you as an activist on the issue of gun violence prevention who has been steadfastly working on that issue passionately, obsessively, for years. I know the challenges when you've been fighting and screaming from the rooftops for years, and then finally people are paying attention and they say, oh, this is the beginning, and when is it going to get done? That's why I want to call out to the community to say that this harnesses energy and this passion that we are all feeling, and hold all of us accountable, and make sure that we do the things that we've said we'll do in this room. And I'm encouraging the people out there, the activists, to harness the energy, take this passion, and remember that this is sustainable, it's ongoing, it is sometimes dirty, hard work, and we have to be able to have those conversations. And like Brenda just said, a lot of times we're not going to agree. We're going to say things that feel really egregious, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't say them. And if we want to talk about defunding the police, whether we support that or don't support that, we have to talk about it so we can kind of get to the roots of what we're really talking about and where real change can be made. I like Laura's suggestion, and maybe that's something that can come out of the task force, which is a suggested media list. That's my day job. I work in the entertainment industry, and I think storytelling has a great ability to take us and bring us to conversations that are very difficult. So through books, through movies, through podcasts, we can come together to have some shared conversations. Michael, to your point, absolutely, we're kind of building this rocket as we're flying on it, so this hasn't been perfect. And we can talk about that in ways that we can make these kinds of meetings better. But rest assured, I am also a working mom and want to make sure that these meetings are accessible for a lot of people. And if we can only have one meeting at one time, we'll have a second meeting and a third meeting. And this is going to be an ongoing conversation. You know, it's not just going to end here. And for me, this is not just me. I'm an engine. I am by no means even claiming to be remotely an expert. I'm claiming to be someone who's got the passion and the skill set to be a convener and to listen, I hope, with fairness and to bring people under the umbrella. And that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to be looking for, Eli, to your point, it should be the Black activists. It's the Black voices in the community that we need to hear from. And that's who I hope will join me as my co-chair on the task force, who will join in its membership so that it's not me you're hearing from and I'm just the engine. So with that, I turn it to you, Mr. Flynn. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you, Nancy. Best of luck with the task force. What this comes down to is respect for one another. It comes down to understanding and respect. And I said earlier that starts in the home. It by no means ends in the home. It's got to be supported by the community. And as the rabbi so eloquently said several times, supported by education. Not just the education system, but the education of the community. We talked about the diversity work that was done several years ago, and I partook in that, some of the dinners and things that were put together, and they were quite good and quite useful. When I look at it, though, I wonder if we shouldn't also focus on what makes us all common, that we're all looking for the best for our families, that we're all looking for the best for our children, that we're all looking to live in a safe community, that we're all looking to be respected by our neighbors, by our colleagues, by our family, by our law enforcement, by our public servants, by our leaders. And I wonder if we shouldn't really celebrate what makes us common and spend the time to educate ourselves and better understand our diversity and what that means, because it's truly exciting once you start learning about different people, different beliefs, and different backgrounds. So I think education is a key here, and not just in the school system. So thank you.
Thank you, Selectman.
Thank you. There's a proverb I just wanted to share with everyone, and it says, how can two walk together unless they agree? And I think we found a common thread that communication is needed on all fronts, on all sides, to get to the broader, answer. And I think, partnering with people like Amanda Hansen, who's had, a meeting going on, which, I commend you for doing that. I commend you for organizing it and doing it at no cost for the love of people and for justice. And we need to ally with, those in the community that have been doing things and have been listening and trying to create change and seek answers with the new task force. And I'm looking forward to, what lies ahead. And I really believe we need to educate all of us. We need to understand each other. We're all culturally different, and America's a big, great melting pot. We all came from different ends of the world, and if we only take the time to understand each other, and that'll only come through conversations, and with that wisdom, there's also another proverb that says, for the lack of wisdom, people perish. And because we don't understand each other, because, perspectives and the way that society has depicted one race over the other, it's almost like television has become our teachers, and we believe what we see, and we dictate, that race in that outlet instead of understanding them and getting to know them. So I'm looking forward to the conversations that we have. I'm looking forward to the task force and working with those in the community and, learning from Black activists, just humanity activists, to be honest with you. And I applaud you, Brenda, for taking the lead to actually put this together, irregardless of any backlash. You didn't know what today would hold, but you said, what, we need change in Fairfield. We cannot become, what we've seen transpired over the last month. And what can I do? Who can help me? Who can rally around me? Rabbi Cormus, I applaud you as well, because I really believe, it's the priests and the kings that have to come together. It's the police officers and those in the community to come together so that we can live, in peace, in shalom, in what we are intended to do, to have, how did you say it, Nancy? Tikkun Olam. And as an African-American person living here in Fairfield for 3 years, I've experienced peace. And I've lived in Stanford, I've lived in Norwalk, I have family in Bridgeport. And I tell you that I sense a different energy in Fairfield. And it's not because of a color, it's because of the souls of the people that live here, that fight for justice. That, we're having this conversation where other towns aren't. So I just commend you all, and I look forward to what we have, going ahead, and even with Cristin. And that blessed me, seeing the post on Facebook with the march and the children coming together to stand up for justice, because it's about justice. It's about life at the end of the day, regardless of the color. So I applaud you all. Thanks.
Thank you, Tameisha. Brian.
That was really well said, and just to follow on your comments about communication, and Brenda, your comments about partisanship and talking past each other, it just made me think of a recent example in my own life with my extended family and the politicalization and weaponization of a term which should be as simple and not controversial as Black Lives Matter. And my attempts to try to explain it to very loving family members who didn't understand the term and why it was important. And I tried to explain it in this way. And I took upon an example from my family where we've been touched by ALS and breast cancer. And I said, if I go out and I wear a breast cancer awareness pin, would you come up to me and say that all cancers deserve awareness? No, you wouldn't. I work in the environmental field. If I'm focused also on saving the rainforest, if someone going to come up to me and say, hey, you're a hypocrite. What about all the other trees in the world? And when you think of Black Lives Matters, it is that breast cancer pin, it is the rainforest. So we need to, I think, take a step back and try to find ways to connect with people. Too often, people on the right, often people on the left, they talk down to each other, they talk to them, but they don't talk to each other. They don't try to seek out an actual connection. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us, when speaking to others, when you're trying to persuade hearts and minds, try to reach out, try to find a common ground, try to be persuasive and take a step back and say, okay, maybe they don't get it, but that doesn't mean, you know, they're a complete ignorant or a fool. It just means maybe their life experiences haven't enabled them to understand things in a way that maybe they probably should. So, you know, let's just all try to, you know, try harder to talk to each other, not at each other. So, thank you.
Thank you. So I would echo sort of some of the same sentiments. My takeaway from listening, and I'm really grateful for those who watched and listened, and also for those who stepped up to ask questions or to share their points of view. And it reminds me of the conversations that I've been a part of over the past few weeks. And there's a phrase in corporate America, when you're creating teams, there's storming before norming. And there are individuals with very strong points of view. You believe you are right no matter what. But, and this happens in the conversations I've been part of, but you have to step back and listen and give that opportunity for dialogue. And it's going to get ugly, and it's going to be difficult. And Nancy, God bless you, it's going to be hard work. But until we can get past that and then really start having honest conversations, people to people, without, and you know, everyone will probably start with, my agenda is correct and I know it and this is the right way and you're just uninformed. And that's going to be a process to work through. And we're at the very beginning of this. But what I'm excited about are the prospects ahead of us. Because I do believe that there is true commitment here. The passion can be directed in the right way. And at the end, we are going to be so far ahead. And I'm excited for that work to begin. And again, I applaud you for starting this. I'm pleased to be a part of it. And I hope that to continue. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. We're going to turn now to the other side of the room. Cristin.
Thank you, Rabbi Kormis, and thanks also to everyone who has participated and who will. This isn't the first conversation. This is an ongoing conversation, and I was privileged to be part of those past community conversations that we left off, and we need to continue in a much more robust way. And I am grateful for Nancy leading it. The work will be all of our work, and we will all have to engage in it together. As I said earlier, I turn to prophets and poets, and I've turned to a lot of Black leaders and Black voices to learn and to grow and to understand. I have a phrase that I often use with my kids: all growth is painful. And there's going to be pain involved in this conversation. As we go forward, I hope that we will listen to the voices of our young people. They really have inspired so much over these past couple weeks, and as Representative Devlin referenced in her comments, I've had the same experiences, many incredible conversations with my own daughter and her peers as they continue to teach me. They're a more diverse generation than we are. They will be. I'll go back to some of the words that I started with, which are vulnerability and withstanding criticism and accepting it. And it's hard to hear criticism about our amazing police department. But as people in power, and about things that we may or may not have done as policymakers, but we have to accept that, to hear it, to be able to engage in that dialogue. We may disagree, we will disagree. There's not one person on this planet I agree with everything about. But particularly as people in power and as people with privilege, it is incumbent upon us to listen and to hear that. I'll share, I'm reading a book about, it's called Say Nothing, and it's about the Troubles in Northern Ireland and the Catholics and the Protestants. And it's amazing the kind of personal violence that this is a nonfiction story and I can't even believe that it's real. And that is what we do, because that happens with us as humans. We make people the other. And that's what we have to work against doing, is being vulnerable with each other, being open. That was, I think, some of the power, and Tony, you referenced this, in those conversations that we were able to have. People gathered in small groups in conversation and allowed themselves to be vulnerable. Those were some of the most powerful experiences I've had here in this community. And I'll take a moment to be vulnerable myself. Today I'm wearing a button that says Stand with Black Women. And I'm going to tell you that I've had the opportunity to wear that button a number of times before, and I haven't chosen to do that because it's not always been politically popular, and it's not always been something that I've felt comfortable doing. But I've learned differently. I continue to learn and to grow, and it is painful sometimes. But that's my job. My job and my role, I believe, as a leader in this community, is to continue to stand particularly and especially for those who feel so at risk, so vulnerable, and so much in pain. So this is a journey that I think is going to have to involve many systemic conversations. They will be hard. We're going to get into it and rumble. We're going to transform ourselves if we allow it, by being vulnerable and really hearing one another. And I really look forward to this messy, awkward, difficult conversation that will help us remember that we belong to each other.
Thank you. Thank you, and it is good to listen. And as mentioned earlier, I do get tremendous dialogue. With the quarantine, I've had the great pleasure of many dinner night table discussions with our children, 25 and 21. And we continue to have the dialogue, and it's refreshing. And what I've learned is the fact that no one is perfect. But if we can all strive to learn and continue that journey, that's part of the process. And it's important to remember as we go through this dialogue, no one is perfect. But we have, as humans, a capacity for tolerance, the capacity for learning, and that's very important. And I want to focus on the fact that we should be looking at a person-centered judgment. You know, we should look at not judging people because they're good or bad, but we should judge based upon what they do is right or wrong. That's a real simple process, but it's a simple and powerful way of moving away from our biases and looking at fact-based analysis. Black lives do matter. And when you talk about that as a poignant matter, as Representative Farnen discussed earlier, as a challenge in that dialogue, we have to understand there's tremendous historical and institutional biases and embedded history in regards to Black lives in America. When we look at the highest achievement gap, when we look at the challenges in every aspect of our history, Black lives do matter, and it is an important part that we need to clearly address. But I would offer to Nancy and to the town leadership, as you embark on this task force and looking at addressing the systemic issues, that we cannot forget to include in the discussion the various groups in regards to multiple other races, religion, our young people whose voice has been so powerful, gender, orientation, socioeconomic stratas, ageism. I think the task force is an opportunity to bring all of those diversity points of view, to also educate them on Black race relationships, because it's not just one segment. We live in a rainbow of diversity. That is the greatness of this country, in which we have webbed and weaved a great fabric of what this country was built on. But a conversation in addressing Black Lives Matters is a systematic challenge deeply embedded in our institutional biases. So when we look at that task force, it needs to incorporate a strata of many of the viewpoints that I mentioned here, because we all have our built-in biases, built-in judgments. And truly, when we have an opportunity to have an airing, of these kind of discussions can we truly, truly be open and learn and care about each other.
Thank you, State Senator Hwang. Captain.
Hello? Okay,
Yep.
thank you. So after listening to some of the comments called in, I know that some of those conversations made people in this room look at us, they were looking at the police like, oh, what are they going to say? What are they going to do? And, those are kind of questions that we field all the time. We hear those questions and, it's part of our institution, for lack of a better term. And going off the institution, yes, we are an institution as police, but we're also people, and we're made up of a diverse community within the police force. And most of us are moms and dads and brothers and sisters, and we have black officers on the police department that probably, I know that they are, feeling very vulnerable to these conversations. Which side do I take? Which side am I on? And I can say that in our community, we are so lucky that I can go through every single officer in our police department and probably name their girlfriend, their wife, their husband, whoever they're related to, because we're such a close-knit community. And I think in Fairfield in particular, it's really a great thing. And I'm honored to be a part of it. As I said before, do we have a lot of work to do? We do, and I'm glad and honored that I'm a part of this conversation, and my ears are open, and the police department's ears are open, and we are listening. So thank you all for having us here.
Thank you, Captain. Chief.
Rabbi, next time if I can please sit on the other side of Bob, because he just answered every question that I was...
And I was going to ask to be on the other side of Senator Hwang here.
Really, I'm just going to echo Bob's points. In listening to all those questions coming in, people may think that we are going to be defensive. We're not. Those were all valid, legitimate questions that we want to have discussions about. They're worthy, and we pledge to you to have intimate conversations about all of those hard items. And the other thing, which Bob said more eloquently than I can, is that we employ from the human race. We will fall down on this journey, but I promise you we'll get back up again and we'll continue to engage. It's what we believe in, it's what we do, and we are committed to this wonderful town that we live and work in. And thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to use my 2 minutes too. Is that okay?
There you go.
And I'm going to put the timer too, so I'm fair to everybody here. So we talked about tikkun olam. Tikkun olam means the reparation of the world. But in order to repair, you have to acknowledge first that something is broken. You cannot repair if you do not acknowledge that something is broken. And we know that we can do better, and we know that we can bring healing to our town, we can bring healing to the residents of Fairfield. So in order to bring that tikkun, to bring that reparation, I think this is a great starting point when we are acknowledging that we can do better, and we should do better, and we will do better. So I really want to take a moment to thank you all for participating, to all our panelists for participating today, our viewers for expressing their feelings, their thoughts, and we tell you, Nancy, that we don't envy you, but we are here for you and to support you. You know, when you go to rabbinical school, the first thing that they teach you is that there's a difference between listening and active listening. When you listen, you just listen, but when you are actively listening, it's because you want to learn. And I think that what we try to do today here is to actively listening to you, to our citizens, our residents, and hopefully to transform those comments and thoughts into concrete actions that can bring a true change to our town. And the last thing that I would like to say is that I am really honored to be here with you, and I want to thank you all. And I want to turn it over to Brenda, who's going to summarize and share with us the next steps and how we are going to move forward from here.
Yes, sure.
I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to come here today. Really, I learned something from each and every one of you. All of your contributions really, I think, have made a significant difference, not just for all of us here together, but hopefully anyone listening. And I hope we do continue to listen, genuinely listen to each other. And so I just want to say that again, thank you, Nancy. Or should I offer my... Are we still friends, Nancy? Nancy and I spent a lot of time talking over the past week or so, and so I really appreciate her stepping up. We have created, for those who are listening via WebEx or on Fair TV, there was supposed to be email addresses listed under each of us while we were speaking, and also at the end there's going to be Jerry Spino is going to have a copy of all the email addresses of all the panelists, including the email address of our new task force. And so you'll see that when you look, and we'll also post it on the town website, and we will share it in the newsletter that I send out tomorrow, so that the residents of our community can email any of us or watch this on Fair TV or email the task force. I know there's been a lot of interest in wanting to serve on it. But again, I think there'll be opportunities, and Nancy and I are going to speak more before it starts up, for engagement. Smaller groups, like Representative Vahey said, smaller groups where people can really honestly speak to each other in a more comfortable atmosphere, and maybe not so much on Fair TV, right? Just real conversations. And so I, again, want to thank Rabbi Kormis. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I think it means a lot for our community to see all of us, and for our law enforcement for being here. And I know it's not easy to be criticized. I don't personally like being criticized either. I have to work better at that. But I think this is really beneficial at the end of the day, and I think it's a good start for our community, our town, to listen to each other and to move in a direction that makes a real difference for everyone in our community. And Tameisha, it made my heart feel good when you said that you felt peace in our community. It did. So hopefully we can all get to a greater peace. And so thank you so much. And I want to thank everyone, Dave Kelly and IT helping us get our WebEx, and my Chief of Staff, Jackie Burlone, and Anthony Calabrese, the Director of Parks and Rec, who did a lot of work, and all the staff town of Fairfield who made sure that we had this opportunity. It wasn't easy getting all these moving pieces together. So thanks again, everyone, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.